Yeah, my name is Dick Wyeth. I'm an English graduate from Leeds University. I got my PhD there in 1972, and I work now in KSLA. I joined Shell in Sittingbourne in 1976, and I moved there after 3 years. I've been there since. Right now I'm a chemist in a process development section of KSLA. My job is there looking at development of processes, things that will one day, we hope, be a commercial part of Shell. Well, I wanted to be a lawyer. That was my first objective. I liked the idea of standing up somewhere in court and being, I don't know, on the good side or the bad side, the sort of naive, young ideal. I wasn't terribly good at the subjects, I think, which lawyers should study. And chemistry was interesting. I had a little chemistry set in my home, which amused me an awful lot, much less so my parents. They didn't really respond to it terribly well. But I think basically because of my developing interest in chemistry, that sort of grew a parallel to and then superseded the interest in law. I applied to, as everybody does, to I think 6 standard universities. It sounds a little bit like desert island discs, but I had my 6 lists. And in the end, I got some really pretty poor A-level results, and the choice was more or less made for me. And I consider it still my good fortune that I went to Leeds in 1966 as an undergraduate. And with a bit of effort, I managed to get into the chemistry school. I should have gone into the physics school because my results were much better. But I hated physics, and I still have a tremendous problem with physical things. I personally chose just pure chemistry. I felt pure chemistry was honoring some sort of commitment which I'd made early in my life. I wanted simply to be a scientist. I didn't really particularly want to bother myself with industry. I was still looking towards a university career for quite a long time after that too. So I was really an extremely serious young man, much less so now, much less young. Well, I left England in '74. I'd done 2 years postdocing in London, which was really an extremely exciting experience, doing more or less what I wanted to do in a very good environment, very good professor. In those days I was making a weird class of compounds called annulines. They're macrocyclic, conjugated macrocyclic aromatic or anti-aromatic compounds. I was working then with Franz Sonheimer, a very famous chemist in those days. And we were just generally trying to make all sorts of totally impossible compounds. And sometimes we proved ourselves right. They were completely impossible. Absolutely no chance. But after that, I decided I really wanted to be a university academic. That was my life. I wanted to teach and do research, and that was it. And through Franz Sonheimer, I went to Columbia in New York and joined Ron Breslow's group. And spent a very happy 15 months in New York, enjoying not just New York, but also the sort of chemistry they did there. And more or less at that time, I became somewhat devastated by looking at the American academic scene. It seemed at the time that that was the only one which offered serious opportunities. But it also offered tremendous disadvantages, the competition between students and between staff, and a very rat race to get on the ladder and stay on the ladder. It was an overdriving, sort of completely meaningless, made universities a nonsense. And on the basis of that, I decided maybe this was not a bad opportunity to look at, again, at ideas in industry. Maybe there's a career for me. I came into KSLA probably for the first time in my life full of an enthusiasm to do things the right way this time. I think up until that point, my interest in chemistry had still left me a bit sloppy in the way I did things. It was total enthusiasm and to do too many things at one time. In KSLA, it's much more methodical. Everything had to be very nicely noted. And I got the impression when I first came in anyway. Turns out it wasn't too much more formal than in England, but it got me into some good habits. Coming into KSLA, I was the Englishman who spoke not one word of Dutch, not even enough to get me a cup of coffee, which I did need quite a lot of. And after a rather heart-searching 6 months of trying to learn Dutch and just fit in a new environment, it suddenly became very easy and extremely stimulating. Since that time, I like to think my Dutch has improved a little bit, up to the point where I can't still have a good argument in Dutch. I think at some point I step back into English just to ram that thing home. But up to the point of having a raging argument, I like to think I can make my way in Dutch. And it's very valuable. It has a great social advantage, I think, if you can understand and maybe give some back in the language of the country where you're living. Wins a lot of friends. I think at this moment, the general atmosphere in Amsterdam is fairly positive. There have been some good times and a few bad times for various reasons, all of which people understood. But now I think the atmosphere is better. It's very positive. My job is essentially to take a project which has gone through some form of early exploratory work, and in my section, looking at focused exploratory work, take it through into a way which you might one day see it in a factory. This particular section, the one in which I work, is interested in new catalysis, new processes, something which is going to be slightly better than our competitors based on technology which has been developed here in KSLA. We're making monomers at the moment which could be of considerable use. This is based on using a gas which otherwise goes to waste and trying to turn that into a useful monomer for paints, textiles, something like that. We're also developing some work, some catalysts to make a new polymer, which will be launched, I hope, sometime with my life history in the company. That sort of thing. I guess my job is to look at some of the more chemical aspects of this work. I'm not a technologist. Maybe I should become a technologist. But I'm here as really as an organic chemist with some limited but some still experience in organometallic chemistry. So that's a little bit still on the growing side. I guess my strength really is as an organic chemist, trying to understand what sort of molecules we're making and what sort of properties they'll have. In this particular section, you'll find some extremely smart people, but from all different walks of life. Every different sort of training, background. It's really a sort of composite of everything you need to get something off the bench and into a factory, as I see it. Again, in this section, ideas will be drawn out a little bit. Maybe you'll start with a fundamental discovery. We like to think it's a discovery, something entirely new. It's a focused discovery, in a way. It's an idea which is designed to bring us into a commercial environment with a particular product. That's how the work starts in the first place, a little bit like general research. However, in this department, we don't actually do general research as such. We hunt around trying to find good reactions, interesting catalysts, things that will be either new or give us a potential advantage over, say, a competitor. That's done by one guy in the section. He spends his time looking for new processes. What we do in this little part of the section is to try and take that idea and just work it through a little bit more, find out where it's going to fall on its nose, where it's going to exceed our expectations, that sort of stuff. Typically, okay, I can give you maybe the example of this monomer where we're working. It's fundamentally, you could say, it's known chemistry, nothing particularly astonishing. Turns out that the guy who made the invention discovered a very new class of potentially very interesting catalysts, and he saw the application in this field. So thanks to him and his rather interesting invention, we take that catalyst and we apply it to what is already an existing process. In this case, it's one which was going on in Germany 20, 30 years ago, but was potentially extremely dangerous. The gas is not particularly pleasant, so we're trying to combine now the more desirable aspects of this catalysis with the potential benefit of that product when we make it. Well, I've only just really started in this section. I was before in an area of general research in another part of KSLA. I was there for about 5 years. When I came in there, well, previously I worked in Shell Sittingbourne. I came in as strictly as an organic chemist into a homogeneous catalysis department, and it seemed like a smart move. In retrospect, I think it was a most enjoyable move. But there, I really had to come in, although with 3 years experience, I had to come in as something of a new boy. Yeah? I didn't speak any Dutch then. The chemistry was completely new. Just about everything was very challenging and very fresh. It was the most enjoyable period. Over the years, then you develop a fragile grasp on the Dutch language, and then it becomes much more entertaining, much more interesting. Especially when you hear your name in a conversation, you know what it's all about. My relationship with the people I worked with was extremely positive. A very good group of guys. Most of them are still here in one form or the other in KSLA. A very stimulating few years. General research, I think, has a sort of hat on it of quiet men beavering away and scratching away at glass and not achieving very much. I think my impression is very much the opposite. It's a very dynamic atmosphere, done by people who are, from the outside, a bit quiet. But the chemistry is very exciting. Management is at every level. I have a section head, I have a division head. Somewhere up there I have a director. And they're all my managers. And the contact, for example, with my section head, my immediate boss, is very frequent and very thorough. With my division head, I guess we see each other on a weekly basis, walking in different directions, sometimes talking about something which concerns him, something maybe that concerns me. But he's floating around on top. And right at the top there's the directors in KSLA. The interaction there is necessarily much less. They're presumably doing things a lot more meaningful than speaking to me every day. I can't think of anywhere else in the world where you have so many very, very different people in under one roof, or under several roofs. It's a bit cosmopolitan, I suppose. You can expect to find just about anything here. In fact, more times than not, when you need something, it's really just a telephone call away. There's just about everything you need. It's a good site. Some very good guys here, and people who've been in the job for a very long time, and they know it. They keep abreast of just about all the developments. I think everybody would have a frustration that my work doesn't get done as fast as it should be. You know, these guys should do it faster or whatever. But that's a very small point, I think, compared to the expertise that is here. When you get an answer, you know it's a good answer. Personally, I guess most of my analytical needs, if I can call them that, are down on the molecular level. We want to know what it is about a particular molecule, what it is, what makes it special from the others. So we're really looking towards people who work with spectrometers and various forms of separation techniques. So we start off maybe with something slightly impure, but we want in the end to have data on a pure compound. So really we're looking at extremely high technology equipment with very, very proficient people running them. We have a lot of interactions with universities, and I like going back there every now and then and seeing the way they do work still. I guess the big difference is in the industry you have a very defined area where you're working. You know what the problems are, and there's a very considerable incentive to solve the problems. Chemistry is more or less the same. There's fundamentally no difference. It's chemistry in both camps. In industry I have the feeling, and that's maybe because I've been out, in universities I have the feeling, and it may be wrong, maybe because I've been out of it for so long, that they've lost the ability to identify a good problem. There is a tremendous wealth of manpower in a university, and sometimes I feel, looking at the literature certainly, that it's misdirected, that it could be better directed. But then that's a very subjective opinion, probably one fashioned because we are so focused here. I think you have to have an idea yourself about where you're going, what you want, and how you want to get there. But then the company is there. It's a very big multinational that you know. You hope that somewhere there's a slot going to open where you can slip into, and that's going to be part of your plan. Maybe it takes longer than you thought. Sometimes it takes shorter. Sometimes It comes as a great surprise. It could happen tomorrow. But the company ostensibly looks after you, but I think the initiative lies with the person who's moving. Again, it's a personal opinion. I wouldn't like it to be seen as anything else. I feel that the environment is really as stimulating as a person cares to make it. If you want to go to sleep, then from the time you're 30, you can go to sleep and no one's probably going to disturb you. But then it's not a very satisfying life. But if you want to be a high flyer and jump over buildings, well, I guess the company doesn't stimulate it, but they won't shoot you down. Research assistants in Shell are really the cornerstone. They're very valuable people. A good assistant is probably the most popular person, I think, in the lab. Because without these guys, it's completely impossible to do the work. They have to function on just about, I think, every level. They have to have a tremendous understanding, not only for the work they're doing, but for the context of the work. They have to develop a relationship with the people who are immediately above them, if you want to see it that way. I think it's nicer to look at them as colleagues, not to look at them up and down. But they have to make a very good relationship there, because of course their lives are intimately involved with the guy who's running the project. But they also have to, I think, to have a departmental responsibility and really the whole sphere of the place, what you feel when you come inside, and at the end of the year what you've achieved as results. These are all very dependent on the assistants which you have. They have to be very good, extremely good. Sometimes I think it's a nice game to think about your career, where you're going. Sometimes, for whatever reason, it doesn't make too much sense to think about it so seriously. I feel it's nice to be able to think that you've planned a career, but I don't know anybody who can honestly say to me, this is my career and this is the way I planned it. I think that would have to be a very exceptional person. I think for most of us, and I include myself here, the career develops mainly as a result of a number of circumstances, some of which later on you say, that was really what I was looking for. I'm glad it broke that way. But I think everybody has to conclude at the end of the day there were some bad breaks and things that didn't happen according to the plan. So my career, as I like to see it develop, is going to be very different to the one I eventually have. I'm a realist in that sense. I feel at the moment that science fascinates me still so much that I want to stay a scientist. I've had my chances, I think, to be a non-scientist along the way, but in each case I've chosen to stay in science because it's so absorbing and because it's something which is finite. There's always an answer. Sometimes it's a very vague answer, but it's a rather it's a certainty in science. There's going to be a yes or a no, or there's going to be some figures. And when everything else is falling around your head, all sorts of personal or social things, everything's going wrong, and it happens every now and then, it's nice to look back on science and say, well, you're not going to let me down, are you? I guess the first few decisions I made were very accidental. For example, when I left Leeds, I'd had a very good time in Leeds. I got my PhD there, and I wanted to do a postdoc. But my view on the world was extremely narrow. I didn't know too many places where I could go and do a postdoc. I didn't know that too many people who would accept me as a postdoc. And I guess the first accident, and a very pleasant one, was being suggested to me going to London to work with Franz Sonheimer. And really, because his letter came back so fast, and the others, to other people, somewhat slower, I was already on the way to London and working with him. And that was a great man. Franz Sonheimer, I think, has got to be remembered as being an ambassador in chemistry. And I learned a lot about the style and the way to conduct yourself from him, as much from the chemistry. But at the end of 2 very pleasant years, I had to move on. I couldn't stay on this miserable salary for much longer. And he was the one who suggested, think about going to Columbia. I didn't even know where Columbia was. It turned out to be in New York, which did sound rather appealing. So almost without thinking, I went to New York. It was a very automatic response. It had been recommended to me. It sounded like a great idea. It took some while to to convince my parents that this was a good idea, going away, being that far away, and they kind of hoped that I'd stick around in England. But that was also, I think, almost a non-decision, being pointed and said, hey, this is where you should be, and like a good boy, I took their advice. I guess I started to make real decisions about what the hell I was doing in New York, because then, well, you could stay, I think you could die happily in New York. In fact, you can do that any day. It's rather a dramatic place. But after 15 months there, I felt my illusion of being an academic had shattered. Yeah, it was a complete lie. It was a falsehood. And then I had to make a very conscious decision. And at that time I was being pushed towards a number of university appointments, I think. I had the feeling. But they weren't attractive anymore. So I was springing all sorts of ways. I applied to several companies. That's when I really thought about Shell again. That's probably, in retrospect, one of the most active decisions I ever made, was to turn completely around from one side and to go off in the direction of the chemistry, which I'd always not despised, but certainly treated with immense suspicion.